We have Rotus Odiri here for business updates across the African continent. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, all our viewers. Happy Democracy Day. Yeah, so I mean, as far as the business, it's a public holiday, not much happening. But the president, though, did mention a number of things with regards to poverty, paying tributes to MKO Abiola, and also talking about how Nigerians need to sacrifice, reiterating his decision to remove fuel subsidies. Let's jump into some of the quotes. We just pulled a few excerpts from what he said. Poverty, of course, an issue here. We know how many we are as far as multidimensional poverty. He says, so the winner of June 12, that's MK Abiola, democracy offered the best chance to fight and eliminate poverty. He then went on referring to his manifesto, saying that 30 years ago, a farewell to poverty was what his manifesto was about, because he was convinced that there's nothing divine about poverty. And then he ties that in with the decision to remove fuel subsidies, saying that poverty is a man-made problem that can be eliminated with clearly thought out social and economic policies. And Nigerians are going to be looking forward to those policies over the course of the administration. It says, for that reason, in my inauguration address, and it's interesting, he gave the kudos to his predecessor. I gave the effect to the decision taken by my predecessor in office to remove fuel subsidy albatross and free up for collective use the much needed resources. He tied that albatross to people that he says have been benefiting from it, which he says is a select few. Fuel subsidies had hitherto been pocketed by a few rich. I admit that the decision will impose extra burden on the masses of our people. I feel your pain. Also saying that this is one decision we must bear to save our country from going under and take our resources away from the stranglehold of a few unpatriotic elements. I will say that a lot of Nigerians are hoping that the government also cuts costs on its parts and also, undergoes, personal finance 101. It says the government I lead will repay you through massive investment in transportation, infrastructure, education, regular power supply, healthcare and other public utilities that will improve the quality of life. So lots of promises there with respect to his speech, and that's what the business community was picking out from that. Dr. Abati's interview yesterday with former Minister Hadi Sirika, Air Peace, responding to a couple parts of the interview. He was, I think when Doctor asked him about why didn't Nigeria Air work with, ARIC, that's under the auspices of AMCON, Asset Management Corporation, and also Air Peace. On Air Peace part, Sirika said that they leased 2 Boeing 777s and they made a loss, I think he said about $250,000. They said, no, that's wrong, that they actually own 3 of them and they are not leased, and they bought them outright. They also said no losses were incurred on their Boeing assets. Then Sirika also said that they didn't have the capacity to, as far as them not being picked to be the national carrier, that they didn't have the capacity to go to the United Arab Emirates. And they said, well, it's not about the lack of capacity, it's because of the fact that there was a visa ban and it didn't make any business sense for them to fly to Dubai. Same thing with South Africa when there were issues with Nigerians getting South African visas. So yeah, that's their piece. And then finally, the markets will get a chance to respond tomorrow to the removal of Godwin Emefiele as CBN governor. So it is anticipated that the markets might climb. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Maybe the place to look would be banking stocks. If the market believes that the cash reserve ratio will be taken down from 32.5, because while we're talking about albatrosses, a lot of banks say this sterilized funds, which by the way have been used to fund ways and means for the government, not earning any interest, they are sterilized and the banks are unable to use. So if you believe that the removal of, which is part of the president's house cleaning comment on his inauguration speech, if you believe that is going to give some leeway to banks, then probably you might see banking stocks climb tomorrow. But then there's also the matter of ways and means, the cap on what can be borrowed being raised to 15%. So does that mean CR will stay in? But anyway, we'll see how the market responds tomorrow. That is our updates from the largest economy.
Okay, so Rotus, let me tell you something today.
Yes, please.
This president's speech was a good speech. When it's a good speech, I'll call it as a good speech. When I have qualms with it, I say it. I'm not a man that does yo-yo up and down.
All right.
That's not me. It was a good speech. Hit the right notes. The things I have against the speech is people are suffering, you acknowledge that, but we will make investment in this. My qualms has always been, you should have given what you will make investment in as a plan before you pulled out the subsidy. I'm in support of subsidy removal, but you also have to plan. So don't just tell me vaguely that you improve transportation prospects and the like. No, tell me what you'll do. Tell me how many kilometers of road you construct after you pull out, how many schools you build, how you're going to improve health outcomes. I'd look at it and say yes. And when I say tell me, it means tell Nigerians.
Right,
all right. You know, because some people say, oh, Rufai, you're very arrogant. Why should he tell you? No. Tell Nigerians.
Yes, indeed.
So that's the framework we had the bone of contention about.
Yeah.
And that's why when the shock came on the market, those are the things people are saying to cushion the effect. All right. He said all the good things. Also, one other thing that I'll have to point out is that he made promises.
Yes, he did.
And promises are key. And now people will judge you by the promises you made. So let us look at those promises, and where he's found wanting in them, we'll make those. We take it out. Concerning Hadi Sirika, I think that's the very first question. I think the most important thing about Hadi Sirika is he should let us see, and I think I didn't watch the interview, but he should let us see the business case
for Air Nigeria.
Because if he lets us see the business case, we'll be able to get clarity as regards all of this that are happening. And the allegations he made against Airpeace has been able to reply. But we all see Airpeace buy Embraer jets here and there. We all announce, I mean, you're a business, you cover all of that. Why are we saying they don't have the capacity? The same Airpeace that some people that are trying to defend Hadi Sirika brought us a report that Airpeace is trying to go into a bilateral deal, I think with the government of Antigua or something. So if the same Airpeace is doing the same thing you're doing with Ethiopian Air, with other countries of the world, how come they don't have capacity? But they have capacity to go bring Nigerians back from Sudan and South Africa and other parts of the world. But all of a sudden, they don't have capacity. Because when you talk about the business case should also revolve around national development. I will have thought that the first right of refusal will have been a national airline. If they say they don't have the capacity, then Ethiopian Air. But all of this we're just saying is just very vague until you see the business case.
And we'll see what the new administration says.
So let us see the business case and let's see what the new administration does. But the truth has to be said. And for the sake of the argument, the airlines do it everywhere. All right, people partner with other pre-existing airlines to be able to get their way out. I mean, a great example is what is happening to Askai. Askai has been doing well. In fact, they've been making humongous profit. But it's a partnership between EcoBank and the government and Ethiopian Air.
Ethiopia, okay.
All right, so that's just the argument.
Okay, very quickly, two things. Obviously, what's trending at the moment is the president's Democracy Day speech. And it's exactly 14 days, 2 weeks to his inauguration speech, and also 2-week anniversary of his announcement of the removal of subsidy, which he did mention in his speech in terms of the business side of that speech. The quotes you got at the quote I actually was going to center on, one of which was where he said that he feels the pain of Nigerians. When I heard that, I thought that's a nice soundbite, but when we see the political class, especially for the ordinary Nigerian, it doesn't look like they even understand or are in touch with the pain of the people. Because it's not the same issues that in terms of going on mobility, accessibility to infrastructure that they have to endure. So there's a bit of, if they're going to make statements like that in terms of leaders, they must demonstrate. And this leads me to the second part of his speech, which I quite also flagged off, which is where he said that we have to bear the sacrifice. It's for a limited time. And you mentioned it, Rotus. If you're expecting Nigerians to sacrifice for a greater nation, we must see it start from the top. You lead by example, not by what you say. So what we want to see as Nigerians is also to see our leaders sacrifice for the good of the nation. No more, if he would reduce the ESTA code that some of the public officials collect when they travel abroad. He would reduce foreign travel. He will reduce the amount of medical tourism, MDAs, his political appointees. He will look into those areas if he really wants to show that we're in austerity times and we need to just buckle our belt for the good of the nation. Let us see it first by example. The interview with Dr. Bati yesterday, excellent. What we had said about, well, he said he wants to be called Senator, not Captain Hadi Sirika, I saw that part, is that he has talked about the fact that he wanted to answer some questions. We said it's shrouded in secrecy, and that interview was meant to expose a few things. But instead, it still raises even more questions, one of which, and I'll move on because there's so many questions to be raised, was the issue around how much, because I've asked the question, how much was paid for that flag off or for that demonstration that happened, in May. And he said, it was the investors that did it. That's still not clear. That's still not. Are you saying that Ethiopian Airlines funded or the investors funded that the chartered aircraft, repainting the aircraft, bringing it here, and he came as a guest, as the Minister of Aviation. Doesn't sound very true.
Questions?
Let's go.
Okay, let me spend additional few seconds on the president's speech. Now, part of it that we have remarked upon is the fact that the president talked about the heroes of June 12, where the list is not exhaustive. And I guess within the context of that brief speech, it will be difficult to have an extended list. But I recommend Joe Igbokwe's Heroes of Democracy, published in 1999. In that book, Joe Igbokwe gives a very long list of names. And as I said earlier on this same program, it was a pan-Nigerian struggle, although there was later an attempt to reduce it to a Yoruba struggle. And some of the names you have there, Frank Kokori, who was at the time leading NOPENC, they were part of the struggle. Pengassan was part of the struggle. Journalists died in the course of the struggle. Bagauda Kauto, Chima Ubane, General Secretary, first General Secretary of the Campaign for Democracy. Quite a long list. Chief Gani Fawemi, Professor Wole Soyinka, who led Nalikon. All these were part of the process, the heroes. Ndubisi Kanu, as I mentioned earlier, Dan Suleiman. However, as we talk about the heroes of June 12, it's also important to use today to remember the villains. At that time, there was a group called Association for Better Nigeria, led by Chief Aton Zeribe. Now, that Association for Better Nigeria went to court 2 days to that election to try to stop it. The election held as the counting of the results continued on 15 June. Association for Better Nigeria went back to court and said that the election, the results should be stopped after it had been declared that MK Abiola had won convincingly in 19 out of 30 states of the Federation. There was also one young man called Kanu, who was part of that, subversion of the democratic process. And then, of course, the military junta, who decided that they had the power to subvert the will of the people. And even, at that time, prompting civil society groups and spokespersons in civil society to say, this must never happen again, because the will of the people must be respected. But do we still respect the will of the people? That question is hanging there in the air. You brought the question of Godwin Emefiele. Yes, over the weekend, I was asking an economist, how are the markets responding? Because we were told that there was a drop, in the market. But the person said no. By the time the announcement was made on Friday, that the market had closed for the day. Yeah. So you are absolutely correct. It's only this week now that we will see if there's any response from the market, as will be the case ordinarily in other parts of the world. But the point to be made, I've seen all kinds of writings in the media, or social media particularly, speculation about, motives and all of that. What is important is that Godwin Emefiele, should not be subjected to trial by media. Yeah. A lot of people have been saying a lot of emotional things. Number two is that he has a right to fair hearing. And the Nigerian state, must respect his right to fair hearing under the laws. And, all these stories about vengeance and vendetta, no, the law does not create room for vendetta or vengeance. When you accuse anybody of whatever, the person must be given the right to defend himself. And until all of that is done, I think we as Nigerians must desist from trial by media. Because it's very easy to go to the media and say all kinds of nonsense without really having, the details of the investigations.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you very much, Rotis, and enjoy the rest of your day. I'm sure we'll see you back again at 11.
Certainly.
Well, for Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. The week's dominated, of course, by the meeting of the Fed and inflation results in the United States. However, looking at the detail of it, the Asia-Pacific markets not moving an enormous amount. The Nikkei up 0.6%. A general story from that sort of region. Investors are not so much looking at the lukewarm demand from China, but they're looking to bordering countries. We've talked about this before many times, like Japan and so on, South Korea, Vietnam, Those are the kind of countries that investors are looking at right now. I still feel as though the Chinese authorities are not that far away from rebooting the economy there, but we'll absolutely see. Staying with China, this time from the Saudi point of view, they're saying that collaboration is much better than competition with China. They are talking trade, they're talking energy. Their leaders obviously have met and talked. Xi visited Saudi last December. So I think a growing realization from Saudi, at least, that whatever it's doing about the oil price and all the rest of it, which again is a different conversation, their idea about China is collaboration rather than competition. As far as the US is concerned, let's recap that. The S&P had a decent week. Futures, though, very little changed. A big week coming up, as I mentioned, the Fed, inflation figures from the United States, and so on. Now, George Soros, let's concentrate on him now, has passed on the reins of his business to his son, Alex. George Soros has always been a very big Democrat supporter in the United States. His son, apparently, according to George, is much more political than George is. This is Alex. And George Soros, of course, is famous as far as these shorts are concerned because he shorted the pound very successfully in 1992. We're going to turn our attention to the streamer Netflix, which has, if you're a member of it, you will have received an email from them talking about the way in which you can no longer share it with your friends, only family members. And that's increased. They've had their 4 biggest days of increased subscription, up 100,000 per day, as opposed to the normal 20 to 25,000, 100,000 pounds a day, and that's been measured over the past 4.5 weeks. So revenue's very up there. You will have heard about Crispin Odey in the United Kingdom. He's a hedge fund manager. There have been misconduct allegations made against him. Now Euro funds are actually pulling their money, and they're placing restrictions on anything placed by that particular asset management and asset management to stop people withdrawing the funds very, very quickly because they don't want to collapse. UBS attempting to, it was told, as you know, by the Swiss authorities to merge with Credit Suisse. They've now drawn up some internal red lines. No risky investments unless they're approved by UBS staffers. So Credit Suisse, as I told you, it would be very much in second position as far as that takeover is concerned, and UBS wanting to run it their own way. UK on the heels of Rishi Sunak meeting Joe Biden in the White House. And this survey took place before he'd actually sat down with Biden, but it still shows a lack of confidence as far as US business is concerned in the UK. On a scale of 1 to 10, the approval rating was 7.3. Now it's 6.5, 6.5. So that's going down. UK food bosses are also saying this is Danone, which prides itself on healthy food, including yogurt. It also does Evian water and Volvic water. Its CEO, James Mayer, has been saying that UK food producers should be making food safety and lack of obesity and anything that moves towards that part of their general product. As far as oil is concerned, now this is a very interesting one. Goldman Sachs have now reduced their target to $90 a barrel by the end of the year. Prices are declining on weak China demand as well. Brent's about $74 a barrel. It'll vary during the day. West Texas Intermediate about 69. Iron ore too. Demand for that is falling because of Chinese property woes. Whenever a property does well, the demand for iron ore increases. Gold is very, very lumpy, basically, as far as investment in that's concerned, as you'd expect, before the Fed announces its decision later this week. And as far as cryptos are concerned, now Bitcoin and the rest of them are sort of stabilized very, very slightly over the past few days. That's according to CoinMarketCap. Bitcoin, Ethereum, they've also made small advances as well, but Bitcoin has sort of stabilized. Let's hope we have a quiet week. I suspect we will not. That is the global view.
Very quickly, I'd like to know, is there any updates on the Chinese property market going burst? How did China solve that problem?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. China what doing with the market?
The China property market incident going burst. How did China solve that problem?
Yeah. So we haven't heard a great deal about the Chinese property market. We get dribs and drabs about how we saw that, that there's not a demand for first homes, but there is a demand for people swapping homes. So that suggests to me that those who are on the property ladder are finding it reasonably okay. Those who aren't are finding it too expensive. We haven't heard from the world's largest indebted company, Evergrande, for some kind of time. The only reason I mentioned it was that if you look at the external statistics about China, which is the best way to do it, we're seeing a fall in demand for iron ore. Iron ore in demand for a domestic economy, as far as China's concerned, normally indicates an increase in the property market. That is not happening. There is, in fact, a decline. That's the reason I mentioned it.
All right, let's talk about this recommendation for higher taxes on healthy food in the UK. I know, very good move, very good recommendation, but in light of the rise in food prices in the UK currently, is this a good time? It's a balance between healthy and people just being able to afford to eat.
I think that the big fault in all this is people stocking up on quick, unhealthy foods, and they have not learned to cook food properly. That used to be something that was taught at school. I suspect that is not happening right now, and I mean both sexes doing this. I'm not just talking about a woman's, home is the kitchen and all the rest of it. I'm talking about both parents taking responsibility for this and cooking their food properly, rather than the quick fix of sugar and fat, which the majority of people seem to still be doing. Now, this is not enlightened This is enlightened self-interest, rather, by Danone, because they pride themselves on things like Evian water, Volvic water, yogurts, and so on, and healthy foods. But you're absolutely right. To tax those kind of foods is going to hit households' budgets very, very strongly. I would hope that people actually think, do you know what? Why don't we just make these things ourselves? But I don't think they will.
Well, a bull run in the U.S. markets. The bears have gone into hibernation. The bulls are charging. Should that be an occasion for high hopes? And then George Soros, the man who broke the Bank of England in 1992, is handing over to his son, who says he's more political. Will he be as generous as his father? Although his father says he has earned, taking over.
I've got no idea what the private discussions with his son are. I would imagine Alex probably will be just as generous as George Soros has been over the years. I mean, he's known as a philanthropic billionaire, and maybe he will continue that. But who's to know what discussion? If it were me, I'd be saying to my son, who apparently is more political, sure, be more philanthropic than me.
Yeah, I asked you about the bull's run in the U.S. market. Should it be an occasion for high hopes? Will it last?
No, I don't think so. I reported on Friday that what people were sort of seeing was a move to a slightly broader rally in the United States. But I would suggest to you that all bets are off until we have the inflation figures, which we'll get on Wednesday, and then on Tuesday, and then the Fed interest rate setting meeting, the results of which we'll get on the 14th. I really would not, because the stock market is so skittish at the moment and continues to bear no relation whatsoever to mainstream United States. And that's really, as journalists, what should interest us, not so much what a self-fulfilling prophecy Wall Street actually has at the moment.
Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Michael. See you again tomorrow.